With that being said, we're gonna get into some of our weekly previews. We obviously go over the what was it? The Jets versus the Bills. So the Bills are the -9 favorite. Obviously, I think it's because of they're at home. So what are your thoughts with this game? How do you see this really playing out?
Yeah, the Jets actually beat the Bills earlier this year on a Josh Allen fumble, I believe that they
Yeah.
sack fumbled them on the what would have been a potential game winning drive for the Bills late in the game. I think the Bills are going to handle business this time. They get the Jets at home. The Jets are going through this weird quarterback transition where they don't want to start Zach Wilson, so they want to go with Mike White. Mike White has one good game. He's the savior. All of a sudden, he comes back to earth. Now, what are they going to do? I told you immediately after they mentioned they were going to start Mike White. I didn't understand that
Yeah.
because Zach Wilson is the potential franchise quarterback, and they've been winning games. I mean, look at their record; they've been winning with Zach Wilson. So I don't understand the change. I feel like in that situation, the Jets would have been better off sticking with Zach Wilson and trying to work through the issues, right?
Hmm.
Because instead you change the quarterback, and on one hand, it might help because it makes Zach Wilson maybe more focused and dial in and say, "Oh, I really have to be on top of my game, or these guys are going to bench me." But on the other hand, you kind of bail him out from figuring out the issues that were happening with the offense. So now when Zach Wilson comes back, yeah, they probably told him, "Oh, look, you got to do this better, you got to do that better." But he hasn't really worked it out. He hasn't had a chance to figure it out. And as a young quarterback, you don't get a
Definitely like
chance to
grow
learn
through
that
that.
way. It's almost like if you look at basketball, some coaches they won't call the timeout when things go bad because they want you to work through it. They don't want to bail you out by calling the timeout,
Right.
right? And so this was like that type of situation to me, and I feel like they might have made the wrong decision. I'm not. I don't think destroys anything with the Jets or anything like that
Yeah.
long term, but I think it would have been better. They would have been better off to keep him. I don't. I haven't heard anything. I haven't paid attention much to what's been said about the quarterback status of the Jets. I think Mike White is still the presumed starter at this point. I'll be interested to see how this turns out after this game because we know how good the Bills are. They're gonna put up points, and they also have a pretty solid defense.
Yeah.
So, you know, the Bills might torpedo Mike White in this game, and they have to trot out Zach Wilson. But yeah, look, nine point spread. When you look at the records, that seems a bit funny. But like we said, with these quarterback issues and
You never know what's gonna
The
really
Jets
happen.
just ability to fail somehow, no matter how good they're doing. This year they're having a good year. They could just completely implode right now and miss the playoffs for all we know.
Uh,
Which I don't know if that's gonna happen, but I do think they're gonna lose this game. I think it's a lot to be going through the struggles they're going through right now, with the quarterback issues, and then play a solid team like the Bills in their house. Especially when
it's
you know
December too, so
it's December. It's cold, which both teams play in the cold, right? They play in the Northeast with no dome, um, out in the elements. But you know, the Bills have dropped some games that they should have won. They need to win these games. And they have a higher ceiling and a higher gear that they could go to that the Jets just can't.
they don't have that. Yeah.
And yeah, so I see the Bills winning this game. 9 points is a lot. I'd probably say it's probably 60-40 the Bills cover. More likely that they cover than not. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was a close game either because the Jets defense does show up and tend to find a way to make some stops. But yeah, certainly a fun game. And I also don't think the weather is going to be too bad this weekend. So won't be any like crazy snow games or something like that, which would
Yeah.
be fun to see, but would probably hurt the Bills' chances a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean I'm right with you. I don't think the Jets are going to be able to sustain the Bills, and then on top of that, the Bills want revenge for losing, so that plays into a lot of things. So the next game that we're going to get into is the Eagles versus the Jet. I mean the Eagles versus the Giants. They're visiting MetLife, and they're the -7 favorite, which is interesting. I would think that the spread would be a little bit more, considering that the Giants just tied with the Commanders, and I believe the Eagles are a much better team than the Commanders, although they lost to them. Um, but I the way I see this really playing out is kind of being like one of those run heavy kind of games. I don't know, maybe Jalen Hurts is going to be able to get it going passing, but I think this may be a close one. And I think maybe the Giants give the Eagles a loss. It would be nice to see Daniel Jones kind of have a pretty good game. And the Eagles, again, they're just a team that I don't believe in too much. So I think they're due for a loss. And then on top of that, it's like just being an underdog at home. We seen how this played out throughout the season with a lot of team. I mean, even with the Giants. The Giants have been underdogs in most of their games, and they've been able to come out with wins. So
Yeah, yeah. Look, -7 spread in a tough divisional game with this NFC East. It's literally anybody's ball game anytime any of these four teams play each other. Um, yeah, I mean, like you said, probably be a close game knowing how things go. The problem with the Eagles, or the problem that the Eagles pose for the Giants, is that the Eagles have an ability to really pull away and put the game out of reach, where the Giants don't have that card. So that's the one thing that can kind of you know, completely change the game. Jalen Hurts could just start airing it out to AJ Brown and go up 3 touchdowns, and it's kind of game over.
out of reach. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Eagles do have that variable to their team, but otherwise, I would expect this to be a pretty close game, and like you said, one that the Giants can win. You know, Daniel Jones and his ability to run the football paired with Saquon is a lot to handle. That being said, the Eagles' defense is pretty solid. But look, we've seen in other football games, it's only a few plays. They could break off a few long runs, and that could be the difference right there. So 7 point spread. That's probably about right in terms of where Vegas would place this spread. Although I could easily see it being a -9 spread. I wouldn't be surprised if Vegas placed it that way either. But yeah, -7 seems about right. I'd say I'd lean towards the Giants covering it, but I wouldn't
Be
put money
surprised.
or put a large amount of money on this. If you want to sprinkle a little bit on it, fine. But yeah, covering that 7 point spread when the Eagles could just come out and air it out against the Giants, put it out of reach is a bit tough.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens with that game, and we'll be on the lookout for that next week. So the next game we're gonna get into is the Dolphins versus the Chargers. The Dolphins are the -3 favorite, and they're visiting the Chargers, which is interesting. We've seen the Dolphins. They just dropped one against the 49ers. Obviously, that was a tough game and kind of like a testing game, but it was nice to see what how they measured up against a playoff like team. The Chargers, they're also a great team. We've seen them struggle also as well. I think this is kind of an even matchup. This is very similar teams in kind of like how they're able to win games and how they've lost games. So I mean, I think overall, I'm gonna go with the Chargers. They're the underdog, but I think Justin Herbert take care of business, and I think the Dolphins drop two in a row.
Yeah, this game is weird one to judge. I mean, I don't. I would agree that the Dolphins are probably shown to be the better team. Um, but potential wise, I think the Chargers can do and be right there with the Dolphins any game. Um, the Dolphins have proven it a bit more this year, but yeah, it's hard to kind of discount the Chargers' ability to make plays with a healthy Keenan Allen back and being at home. I would have thought this would have been maybe a pick 'em.
Yeah.
Because that maybe if the Dolphins were favored, it would have been maybe by 3 points, but then it's the Chargers at home. But it seems like Vegas really likes the Dolphins in this game. Um, and yeah, I probably would roll with the Dolphins just because it's funny. Both teams kind of really need this game. This is an important game for both of these teams' season. In terms of the Dolphins suffering that setback loss to the Niners, really needing to get back on track and pile up these wins in a division where everyone else is piling up wins. The Chargers, they're trying to still climb their way into the playoffs. And they're a solid team that hasn't really lived up to expectations, but they could easily be one of the teams to make the playoffs and pose a huge threat to just about anybody they face.
Yeah.
So it's desperation time, right? It's December. We're getting towards the end of the year. We're trying to figure out the playoff picture. Both these teams, I would assume, would be desperate. I would probably roll with the Dolphins just because they seem to be more consistent, and I don't know what I'm going to get from the Chargers. If it wasn't for that, I probably would roll with the Chargers at home. But yeah, it just seems
you never know what you're gonna get with
it
them.
just seems like you don't know what you're gonna get. I think smart money goes to the Dolphins, but that being said, in reality, this seems like anybody's game to me.
Yeah.